Ladies and gentlemen, great to see everyone. Hope everyone had a happy new year and a great vacation. So thank you for coming in today. As of today, the Keystone pipeline has an approved route through Nebraska. That's the effect of the decision that was made by the Nebraska Supreme Court today. In effect, the April 2012 legislation that was passed by the state of Nebraska, which granted the governor of the time the ability to approve the route, has been validated. That legislation stands as the law of Nebraska. I would advise you that I spoke prior to the holiday break with incoming Governor Pete Ricketts, the incoming newly elected governor of Nebraska. He was actually sworn in as the governor this week. Today he issued a statement essentially saying that this is the safest pipeline imaginable. He's urged both the American Congress and the President to approve it, and has made it very clear that from his perspective it creates jobs and a tax base in the United States that is important. And so from this step forward, we now have essentially the 90-day national interest determination, which resides with President Obama. I think, as everyone knows, you've been following the progress through Congress in terms of the legislation which is being put forward before the President. I can tell you that my own plan, I will be in Houston, in the United States, the middle of this month, and I will be going to Washington and New York, essentially the first week of February for the entirety of that week. And I also plan to be in Washington the weekend of February 20th for the National Governors Conference at that time. So I'm pleased to answer any questions that you have.
Premier, given
yes.
the intransigence, the ongoing intransigence by the Obama administration, even lately having their spokesman say, well, we're not going to approve this, are you placing your hopes in a congressional override, in the fact that they could possibly secure enough votes to override a presidential veto?
Well, I think it remains to be seen how this plays out in the United States, and I would simply make the point that from my perspective, the project should be approved. It will create jobs. It's an environmentally defensible project. It's supported by the American people, and has overwhelming support and increasingly bipartisan support in Congress. To respond to your question, I don't know how this is going to move forward as between the Congress and the President of the United States. Clearly, we as Canadians and as Albertans have allies in terms of the Congress who are putting the legislation forward. It's been through committee. It remains to be seen how many votes it will have and how it plays out in terms of the veto and being veto-proof and so on. I think is difficult to judge at this point. I think my role as the Premier of Alberta is to be in Washington, to ensure that the facts are clear, to speak to the environmental record of Alberta as a jurisdiction, and we're proud of the environmental legislation that we have, including the legislation relating to climate change, and to make sure that the facts are clear about Alberta, the United States, and the integrated energy systems that we share and which drive prosperity.
Have you spoken to anybody in the Obama administration?
I've not spoken to anybody in the President's office. I have spoken to other governors. I have spoken as well with senators, and we continue the dialogue. I spoke yesterday with Mr. Merrifield, who of course is our representative, and he is actively working on our behalf in Washington.
Premier, do you think Canada and Alberta will need to do more on the environmental measures, given that President Obama does continually link the Keystone issue to climate change? Will there be a need for further action taken to win approval from him on this project? Well,
that's not my sense. I'm aware of the comments which the President has made, and that's why I feel it's important to be in Washington as the Premier of Alberta and make sure that the facts are clear about the purpose of this pipeline, about the jobs it creates, about its effect on the environment. The State Department in the United States has previously ruled that this pipeline will not increase greenhouse gas emissions. I think that's clear, and it's part of the presidential process. You know, I think it needs to be said that Alberta has very sound environmental regulation in the oil and gas industry. We have not done a good job over many years of informing the public outside of Alberta of the good things that we do. I've never suggested we should rest easy. There's always room for improvement, and that includes in our greenhouse gas emission framework. But all things considered, Alberta has a regulatory framework for industrial emissions, and no other jurisdiction that produces oil and gas has a framework as good as the one that we have. And so I don't think doubling down in terms of that framework and imperiling our competitiveness is the solution in Washington at this point in time.
Premier Prentice, can you just comment on the economy? There's new job numbers out today that show an uptick in unemployment. Shell now says that it's going to cut less than 10% of its workforce in the oil sands, and as well, one European bank, Deutsche Bank, is suggesting that Canada's housing situation is up to 60% overvalued. How do you see our economy?
Well, I won't speak to the report relative to housing values. I will speak to the public finances of Alberta. Oil prices as of this past week, have been dipping below $50 per barrel. This is a very serious circumstance for our province. It is a circumstance that demands prudence, caution, and care in terms of our public finances. And I have said repeatedly before, in terms of the private finances of Albertans, this is a time to be careful. All of the advice that we are receiving is that we are going to be in a low cycle in terms of commodity prices, in terms of oil prices, for some period of time. This has an effect on Alberta's public finances and on our economy that I think people understand. I'm heartened that people appreciate the significance of this, and we're all very concerned. We are tough, we're resilient, we'll get through this. We've been through tough times before. We've been through low points in the commodity cycle before, and we will see them again. But these are some of the most challenging circumstances we have faced in the last 25 years, if not the last 50. I mentioned to a member of the press gallery yesterday that if prices were to continue and persist for a year at $50 per barrel and less, the fiscal hole for the government of Alberta in terms of our finances would approach $10 billion. I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, but we all need to be alive to just how serious a circumstance this is. We have begun the process of preparing next year's budget. We're taking a different approach than we have followed in the past. There's a specific cabinet committee that was struck, which I chair and the Minister of Finance co-chairs. It's been working right up to the Christmas break, and we started work again this week. I can tell you that in terms of the projections going forward, the advice I get is that we should assume that oil prices next year, 2015, 2016, will be in the vicinity of $65 per barrel through the year. We could assume $75 per barrel in the year that follows. The effect of those prices is that in 25-15, 25-16, we will need to deal with a $6.7 billion revenue shortfall. And in the subsequent year, it will be in the vicinity of $5 billion. The year after that, we should be back towards balanced budgets. And so these are the circumstances we're dealing with. They're serious. We need to be confident and optimistic about moving forward, but we also need to be prudent and careful. Last couple of questions.
Do weak energy markets add urgency to getting projects like Keystone XL approved?
Yes. Other questions?
Premier, does the government intend to keep borrowing, though, to be able to make the commitments that you've put out there, for example, on new schools, things like that?
Well, we're wrestling with all of the financial demands that we have. I simply make the point that as oil prices have softened, the revenue that we have come to expect as Albertans from the oil and gas royalties is no longer there. It has decreased from $9 billion to something less than $4 billion over the course of the last 90 days to 120 days. And so, it's a serious circumstance, and we need to be careful in dealing with it. Pipelines in every direction are important. To come back to your question, it does add urgency, because whether we are achieving a low price or a high price, we want to achieve the best possible price, and that's the global price. We only get that by accessing tidewater, and so pipelines in every direction continue to be an imperative, and as long as I am the Premier of Alberta, will continue to be a focal point.
Premier, you already pre-announced a couple of
Comment est-ce que
spending.
vous expliquez qu'on parlait d'un surplus budgétaire de plus d'$1 milliard? Maintenant, on parle d'un déficit de 500 millions de dollars. Comment est-ce que vous expliquez ça?
Nous avons un défi, nous avons une situation sérieuse, et il nous faut continuer de travailler avec notre ministre pour l'équilibre de notre budget. Yes, sorry, I cut someone off.
Premier, you already pre-announced a couple of potential spending deferrals, the Alberta Cancer Clinic here in Calgary, and Minister Dirks referenced full-day kindergarten. What else is there in the works? Can you give us any idea?
Well, I can tell you, Gary, we're reviewing the capital plan, and are going through it project by project. We've not finished that work, and I just want to be clear with the media that we're taking a different approach to the preparation of the province's budget than has been followed in the past, with a committee which has essentially started with a blank sheet of paper. We are aware that we need to deal with expenditure reductions. People need to see the government tightening its belt. We also need to deal with the revenue income of the government, and we also need to judge how and to what extent it's appropriate to have deficits over the next 3 years. So all of those are under consideration. The capital plan is being reviewed. The final decisions will not be made on any of this until basically until the budget is introduced. In the meantime, there's a great deal of heavy lifting to be done, and there's a great deal of consultation with Albertans that will need to take place.
Premier, are the changes going to be sweeping enough that you're going to need to go to the people of Alberta for a mandate this spring, a new mandate?
The circumstances that we are in are the most serious financial circumstances we have seen in this province in 25 years, if not 50. And certainly they will affect every Albertan. They will affect every Albertan in this province. That's inescapable. I've not turned my mind to the timing of an election, but I'll tell you this: the timing of an election, as and when it happens, will be driven by what is in the best interests of Albertans, not what is in the best interests of any political party. Thank you.